Check Podcasts.
Hi, I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to Chamber Chats, coming to you, as always, from the podcasting studios here at the Czech Media Group. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I live and work in the historic lands of the Lekwungen-speaking nations, known to us as Songhees and Esquimalt. And, of course, Chamber Chats is made possible by the support of Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union, who are redefining what banking can do for business, for community, and for the world. Okay, so I've lived here 23 years. I came from Ontario. One of the things that fascinated me from the very beginning was all the float planes that we would see in the air. And you know what? Every time I hear one, I look for it. I still look up there and imagine the times that I've flown on Harbour Air and what a great experience that is. Actually, Amanda and I live in a place where the planes fly right overhead all the time. I always go to the window and I always watch them. The experience of flying in a float plane is different from other planes for a lot of reasons. For one thing, you're closer to the ground. You can pick things out. You know exactly where you are all the time. So I'm a big fan of Harbour Air, and this guy, who is the CEO of Harbour Air, Bert van der Stege. How are you?
Thank you, Bruce. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you here, and it's nice to have you in Victoria. You've had some chamber relationships across Canada. You were in Halifax for a while, is that right?
That's right, Halifax, Calgary. And I came to Canada 11 years ago and lived in Ottawa for 3 years.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm kidding. I love Ottawa. It's one of my favorite cities. It really is. So when we see those planes up in the air, what are they? What's their model? Tell me the story on those.
We have a couple of aircraft fleet in our wide range of aircraft that we're using. Here in Victoria, we primarily use the Twin Otter, the 19-seater Twin Otter, the largest aircraft in our fleet, and the Single Otter, 14-seater Single Otter. The name says it all, I think. Single engine, single pilot, Twin Otter, 2 engines and 2 pilots. We also operate Cessna Caravan EX aircraft, 9-seater aircraft, 1 engine, 1 pilot. And they are perfectly suited for the slightly longer routes. So we use that aircraft, for example, between Vancouver and Seattle, Vancouver to Fino, Vancouver Powell River, the slightly longer routes.
They've been referred to as kind of workhorse airplanes. I mean, they're so dependable and they're so powerful. Tell me about them. What do you do to keep them in that kind of shape?
Well, what makes it so unique is that we fly in very harsh conditions, namely salty waters. And that requires significant attention to maintenance, inspections, and overhaul. So every aircraft undergoes a number of checks every single day before every flight. We have a pretty rigorous maintenance program, overhaul program for both the aircraft and the engines. And obviously, during what we call heavy maintenance, not just the daily checks, line maintenance, but during heavy maintenance phases, every now and then, we literally take everything apart and rebuild that aircraft completely. And what you see as a passenger is things like a new seat. And obviously there's lots of components and parts that you don't get to see as a regular passenger that we've replaced.
Where's that done?
All of it is done in Richmond, YVR, in our own hangar.
Okay. That's South Terminal or Main Terminal?
Correct, South Terminal.
South Terminal, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to get all kind of nerdy for a second here, but you've done things for these upgrades and done things like switch from piston engines to turbine engines. Tell me about that process.
That's right, yes. So the majority of our fleet have undergone exactly that change, except for the Beaver aircraft. We have 10 Beaver aircraft in our fleet. Some Beaver aircraft come here. We do operate the Victoria-Ganges Salt Spring route currently with a Beaver aircraft. The challenge with the Beaver aircraft is that typically it seats 5, absolute max is 6 passengers, so 6 seats. We're often payload weight restricted and therefore operate with 5 passengers and baggage on board that aircraft. That's the only aircraft in our fleet that hasn't undergone that change, but obviously I know you're aware, Bruce, of a much more exciting change, and that is the e-Beaver than the e-plane. So that aircraft does have a future for us, but a very different future.
Yeah, so that inaugural flight happened a year and a half ago, 2 years ago?
No, a couple of years ago. 2019 was the very first,
okay.
The very first flight with our e-plane. So almost 5 years ago to date. We've had it here in Victoria for the first time last year.
So how big is that transition? Like, will that eventually be the whole fleet, do you think, at some point way down the road? Or
I think there is definitely a future for a much more sustainable way of regional transportation. We think seaplane aviation is perfectly suited for this type of innovation. We fly at low altitude, as you said in your opening remarks. It does, as a result, not require an enormous amount of power to get airborne. It may ultimately become a combination of not just electric aviation and being highly dependent on batteries, It could be hybrid solutions, it could be hydrogen solutions, or a combination.
Speaking of all that, what is the altitude of the average flight? How far above the water or the land are we usually?
300 feet minimum,
Yeah.
500, 1,000, 1,500, depends on the weather, on the route, on air traffic. Obviously, on our most important route here in Victoria, the route between Victoria and Vancouver, we cross the YVR airspace.
Yeah.
So that requires a lot of coordination with air traffic control and other aircraft.
You can see everything. You see the little barns on the Gulf Islands and the stuff when you fly
Yes.
over Wyve. It's really cool.
I love seeing we're an airline that doesn't need to invest in in-flight entertainment. We have out-flight entertainment. Just look out of the window.
Yeah, no kidding. So speaking of the electric planes, the company for a long time has been evolving into its environmental and greening footprint, if you will. So tell me about the other initiatives that you're doing at Harbour Air.
Yeah, we have, I think we were the very first airline globally introducing carbon offsetting back in 2007. We introduced carbon offsetting. Just this year, earlier this year, we have replaced carbon offsetting with carbon insetting, meaning that our passengers, our staff are now contributing to the success of the E-plane. Quite frankly, it's a new concept for us, from offsetting to insetting, but at the end of the day, thanks to our very loyal passengers, customers flying with us every single day, we've been able to afford a project called the E-plane, an innovation called the E-plane. So we're on a path to make air travel here in BC, air travel to and from the island, a lot more sustainable.
So the routes that most people, I think, are familiar with are the ones between Victoria and Vancouver, Nanaimo, Vancouver. It's the ones that I've flown the most anyway. But how many altogether? How many routes do you do right now?
We fly 12 destinations in our network, ranging from Powell River to Seattle, as in north-south, and then Vancouver to Tofino. That route is another 50-minute flight that we do. So 12 destinations in total. These points are connected to each other. Given we're here in Victoria, most relevant for us here in the community are obviously the routes, as you said, to Vancouver, up to 30 times a day to downtown Vancouver, 6 times a day to YVR, the main airport in Vancouver. We fly to Tofino, we fly to Whistler, and we fly to Ganges on Salt Spring.
Yeah. Well, there's some other places you might be flying soon, too. We're going to talk about that as we talk with Bert van der Stege from Harbour Air on Chamber Chats, and we'll do that next. Bert van der Stege is the CEO of Harbour Air. Great way to get around. Tons of fun to look at. So we talked about those main routes, the ones that are used most often. What about flying to Seattle? What about flying to Portland? Is that kind of stuff in the plan?
Yeah, typically what airlines across the world do is they have a long list and a short list of potential new destinations. We're no different. Many communities, many stakeholders reach out to us, including some of your members. We do get requests for new destinations up island. We do get requests for communities that believe that a seaplane service would improve air access and therefore vital infrastructure to the community. So we do get requests from time to time. The destinations you just mentioned, I think I'd consider them being on the long list, not an immediate future. Happy to talk about what we've got planned in the immediate future next, but these ones are probably more for the long list.
Yeah, what would be involved in an international seaplane or float plane flight? That's the same as, I guess, any border crossing experience, right?
Correct. So the answer to that is obviously different regulatory requirements. It's an international flight. We do have to follow requirements, in this case, crossing the border between the US and Canada of both the FAA and the Canadian side.
I mean, we're talking customs all of a sudden. That's a whole other room. That's a whole
customs,
other
immigration. Yep.
All that stuff. Okay, so that's down the road. There were conversations for a long time about the likelihood or possibility of flying between Nanaimo and Victoria, or Comox and Victoria. Is that ever talked about?
Yes, it is another request that I get from time to time. We do actually offer that route as a charter flight, so we don't offer that route as a regular scheduled flight, but quite a few businesses ask us to operate routes as such on a charter basis. Very convenient, affordable, and for that type of flying, our Beaver aircraft is very well suited. We are slowly replacing our Beaver fleet. 10 of these aircraft currently in our fleet, including the one E-Beaver. We're replacing those aircraft with the larger single otter, benefiting from economies of scale, lower operating cost. But the Beaver is very suitable for charter flights, including the one example you mentioned.
You know, the experience of flying over the Gulf Islands and the mountains and the things that we see is just, it reminds us how beautiful this place is. And it's a perspective that you don't get from the ground. One of the more beautiful areas that we have, of course, is the North Island, the Broughton Archipelago, and places like that. Any talk of service going sort of further north on the island?
We do operate, as I said, we do operate those type of flights as charter flights, exclusively as charter flights. See it almost as a combination of a charter, as in a passenger would like to get from A to B, but also the scenic component, as you said, the beauty of the landscape, the experience itself.
Yeah.
We work with lodges, we work with hotels, we work with partners in those communities that see the potential of improved air access and a very unique way of getting to that destination by the iconic BC seaplane culture.
Yeah. I mean, I consider any flight on Harbour Air going anywhere to be a scenic flight, but I live here and you see it all the time. But what you do specific scenic
We
flights
do,
as well. Tell me
absolutely,
about
yes.
those.
We just won a Viator award for best tourism attraction here as a result of these scenic flights. Essentially, what we do is a lot of customers come to us and want that experience. If they're from the US, Mexico, Europe, they're just not used to seeing seaplanes. And then they get to Victoria, they see our harbor, they see a seaplane. They get to Vancouver, same thing, they see a seaplane and would like to experience. Some passengers request a ticket and go from A to B and back. We have many visitors from Vancouver here in Victoria that spend the day in Victoria, come on the flight in the morning and fly back with us at the end of the day. And some just want the experience of a quick takeoff and landing and be back in 30, 40, 50 minutes.
Yeah. Just that whole bobbing on the water when you're going along. It's all very
Exactly.
calming. It's very relaxing. I like it a lot. The larger airlines, the national airlines, the Air Canadas and WestJets, have had an issue with a shortage of pilots coming out of the pandemic. Did you guys encounter that issue?
It's been an industry challenge for a number of years. I've been in Canada almost 11 years now, and 11 years ago, this was already being talked about, as we know it's coming. There's a lot of retirements coming, we used to say 11 years ago, and obviously those retirements have happened as planned. Then we had the pandemic. Pandemic was devastating for many businesses, especially in the hospitality industry, and of course, especially in the airline industry. Probably even more so for us because we are a business highly dependent on business traffic, highly dependent on commuters, highly dependent on government traffic traveling between Victoria and Vancouver. We have had to adjust. We've had to pivot. We've had to navigate throughout the pandemic. I'm very pleased to say that last year we've exceeded revenue numbers again versus pre-COVID. This year we're again on track to beat that performance from last year. And obviously grateful that we have a phenomenal group of pilots that are happy working at Harbour Air. We pay them well, we treat them well, we give a very unique opportunity to them. They also, like you, on every Harbour Air flight, still enjoy sort of the magic of what we do and where we get to fly. And just as important, of where we can live. And the final component of our new agreement with our pilot group that we negotiated last year is to assist them in being able to afford to live here. And that has led to us not being in a similar situation, unlike other airlines where we have a severe shortage of pilots. What is an issue and a challenge for many airlines around the globe is not so much the shortage of interest in becoming a pilot. There's enough young pilots that would like to join a company such as ours. What most airlines refer to when they say shortage of pilots is a shortage of experienced pilots. And that's something that we're watching closely and have included in our training programs, from recruitment to training to upgrading to becoming a captain and a successful career at Harbour Air.
Yeah, because Air Canada went through that whole potential problem with the strike that was looming for them. I think some of that was based on the fact that pilots in the States make a lot more money than pilots do in Canada.
Yeah, obviously, as an airline executive, I would say we live here in Canada, we work here in Canada. We can't just compare ourselves to whether it's in the US or name any other jurisdiction, Singapore, Hong Kong, a European carrier. I'm glad, obviously, that Air Canada and the pilot union were able to sort this at the bargaining table, just like we did last year at Harbour Air.
Yeah. So do your pilots qualify to fly those bigger planes, or that's a whole different classification, I'm
It is.
guessing?
Some of our pilots came from bigger planes and like being back at a seaplane airline. It's often where career started. We have pilots that have told us this is what we like doing, this is what we want to do. A big part of the employee value proposition with our pilot group is that you get to be home every night, and that's pretty special and pretty unique for pilots, and
Yeah.
that obviously makes us an attractive employer.
You're an integral part of the tourist experience here, but you're also, as you've mentioned, an integral part of business travel, which is what I've done when I've flown on Harbour Air. There's a balance between the two, and we're going to talk about that next. Our guest on Chamber Chats today is Bert van der Steeg, who is the CEO of the remarkable Harbour Air organization. So I guess depending on the time of year, the ratio of tourist travel is different than the travel for business. So what's that
That's right.
ratio and how does it shift?
Yeah, so I think over the years, Harbour Air was able to grow and became who we are today. At the end of the day, as a result of business travelers, commuters flying with us year round. And then typically it starts to change middle of June, third week of June, when business travel, commuters, government employees stop traveling. And then thankfully the tourist season starts in most of BC. So we've been doing quite well. That completely changed during COVID, obviously. And we're still seeing that business traffic, commuters, government traffic not coming back to levels we've seen pre-COVID. I firmly believe that it likely won't come back ever to the level we've seen pre-COVID, and that is due to the emergence of new technologies, the work from home policies in place, and as a result, we've had to adjust and focus much more on premium leisure, a higher focus on tourism, a huge focus within our commercial department on creating unique experiences, and having tourists fly with us year round.
Yeah, I mean, the technology is things like Zoom and Teams that people just aren't traveling as they used to as well. But I guess companies too have realized that they can adjust their budgets for travel accordingly and place those resources elsewhere. So your shift in business is what you're talking about there, and that's kind of cool. So the other thing, we talked about the pilots. So the float plane experience on Harbour Air, you meet the agent at the desk, and then you will go out and you'll walk the deck and you'll get on the plane. And there'll be someone there taking your bags, and then there's the people with the little grappling hook and grabbing the ropes when you land. That's the only people we see, but there are many, many other people that work behind the scenes.
Yes.
What are the skill sets within Harbour Air?
Yes, we have over 500 employees in total, quite a few more in summer, because obviously, like most businesses here in the hospitality industry, we are dependent on a strong peak summer performance. But like most organizations, we have a commercial department, we have a finance and IT department, maintenance and engineering. We spoke about the need to maintain our aircraft earlier on, is a big part of our organization, and people and culture being the final sort of department headed by a vice president within our organization structure.
We talked before about the Beaver and the Otter aircraft, but you announced something new just a couple of weeks ago that's going to be having you fly now from airport to airport on not a float plane, but a different kind of plane. Tell me about that.
That's right, yes. So, as you will have noticed when you did fly with us as a passenger, Bruce, is that we, being a so-called VFR, Visual Flight Rules airline, can only fly during daylight hours. And that has had a significant impact on our ability to essentially produce in the darker months of the year and the winter months. Besides VFR, meaning we are limited in terms of not being able to rely on instruments. VFR, visual flight routes, meaning our pilots need to be able to see where they're going. And with the weather and climate change affecting us, we do believe that there is an opportunity for us to operate on wheels between Victoria International Airport and YVR South, providing a service that we currently can't offer, namely when it's still dark, and have that aircraft available to shuttle passengers back and forth should we be in a position to cancel our seaplane services.
So I'm trying to remember now. These are refitted Beavers and Otters, or these are completely different models?
Just the Twin Otter aircraft, the 19-seater Twin Otter aircraft, two
Okay.
pilots, two engines, 19 seats, that we will be offering up to 6 flights a day between YVR and YYJ.
Yeah, because when you see them on the ground at the South Terminal in Richmond, near YVR, Some of them do have little tiny wheels on the bottom, right? That are within the floats.
Yes,
But
we
this
don't
is more substantial than that.
correct. Yeah, we don't operate those aircraft, but I know what you're talking about. We don't operate those type of aircraft within Harbour Air. This is a regular set of wheels um, that our maintenance department puts underneath these aircraft, and as a result, we can operate on the regular runways.
There was kind of a myth, I think it's a myth anyway, floating around a while ago that said that, the floats are worth more than the rest of the airplane altogether. Is that true?
Floats are expensive, but no, it's not true.
Okay. Because that's how a specialized kind of training, to do aircraft maintenance. I guess is kind of generic, but float planes, again, require that sort of training. Where do you find those people?
We are very fortunate to again be in a position to not only have a group of very loyal, qualified aircraft mechanical engineers. We have our own in-house training program. We recruit straight from college, typically. Um, Again, there is not a shortage of interest to help modernize the industry to become part of a much more sustainable way. Again, think of our e-plane project. There is a real shortage, not just within the airline industry, but across many industries. Again, as a result of the pandemic, where we've seen many people retire, there is a real shortage in qualified and experienced mechanics, and in our case, we call them aircraft mechanical engineers.
Yeah. You mentioned, too, of course, that you don't have in-flight service the way that the other larger airlines do, but you do have food experiences for people, the Flying Otter and others. Tell me about those.
That's right. Yes, it's a big part of what we call ancillary revenue strategies in our industry. So, a huge component of that is a unique value proposition where we own and operate restaurants and can provide a very unique experience, not just flying on a seaplane and arriving here in Victoria with that beautiful view, but also enjoy a beverage or a great meal,
Yeah.
either before or after you
And watch the
have flown
aircraft.
with us. Exactly.
Yeah. Just quickly to end it off here, you're kind of a world leader in this. You're one of the largest, certainly the largest in Canada, float plane provider. You mentor other organizations and manufacturers too within your sector. Tell me about that.
Yeah, we're the largest seaplane airline in North America, second largest globally in the world, and as a result, probably won't surprise you, we get quite a few requests, and we've always been an airline willing to help others. We just had a major delegation here from Indonesia, visiting Canada, visiting Transport Canada, visiting another couple of companies, and that often leads to something a little bit more structured, namely, can you help us? Can you advise us? And that's what we do through our internal consulting division.
It's great. It's the Canadian thing to do, really.
Absolutely.
Well, the next time you see a Harbour Air float plane in the air, now you know a little bit more about them. And you heard that from the CEO of the company, Bert van der Steeg. Bert, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bruce. Thanks for your time.
You bet. I'm Bruce Williams, and we'll see you again for another Chamber Chat.